Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is John Pierce. I'm the Director of Sport Development at US Sailing, and thanks for tuning in for this town hall session for US Sailing committee members and volunteers with a group of the board and staff leadership. Thanks for taking the time out of your evening to join us tonight, and this sort of kicks off several days of important US Sailing meetings. There'll be another town hall on Saturday that is open to the entire US Sailing membership. But this session is really catered more towards the committee members and the volunteer leadership. So first off, thank you for everything that you do and you have done this year for US Sailing and for the sport of sailing. We appreciate all your hard work. We appreciate the contributions you make in your areas of expertise. And this is the chance to ask good questions, have important dialogue on the strategic plan that is being released, and really appreciate your participation. A couple of notes on the session here. Please use the chat in YouTube to share your questions and add questions at any time. We have a good number of questions that have come in already through the contribution form. So we're going to take those as the beginning of the Q&A session, but we will also hopefully have time for additional questions from the chat. So please use the chat as much as possible. We also have a couple of board members and staff members who will be monitoring the chat and can answer questions directly there as well. And if your question doesn't get answered in the chat, we will follow up via email and make sure that your question does get answered. So please use the chat function as much as you can. A reminder that if you want to follow up with the board of directors directly, you can find their email addresses on the US Sailing website in the board of directors section. So please take advantage of that. Obviously, the staff contact information is also available on the US Sailing website. And this will be recorded. This session is being recorded and will be available on the US Sailing Starboard portal for sharing or review at any time in the future. So please feel free to share that with other people. So to kick things off, hopefully that covers the sort of nuts and bolts of it. I'm going to pass it over to US Sailing President Corey Sertle to sort of give some introductory remarks. Corey?
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'd like to first start by thanking all of you for volunteering for sailing in the various roles you take on to support sailing in the United States. Last November, US Sailing's board gathered in Chicago for the 2019 annual meeting. And as I approach this year's annual meeting, I can only reflect on how much has changed in 12 months that we couldn't possibly have anticipated. The world is a very different place, and every single one of us has been affected profoundly. As sailors, we're uniquely trained to adapt to constantly changing conditions. US Sailing's board, together with staff and committee volunteers like you, have risen to the occasion. US Sailing's board has spent some time during the last 6 months refocusing our strategic direction and considering how we are fulfilling the role and responsibilities of being the national governing body for sailing. Developing and encouraging participation in sailing is fundamental to our mission. Delivering racing is a core responsibility, providing a level playing field for the sport. We have a broad mandate. We serve member organizations who are introducing people young and old to sailing, racing sailors of all levels in all types of boats, and those striving to put sailing and Team USA on the podium at the Tokyo Olympics. I find that being part of the Olympic movement is inspiring, not just for our athletes who are focusing at the highest levels, but also for all of us who volunteer for the sport. Just like our athletes, we are all on the journey toward excellence with trying to be better at what we do. It's in this spirit of striving for excellence, we are challenging our staff team, our community of volunteers on committees, and our board to raise the bar. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for serving our sport. And I look forward to the next hour of listening and learning from you.
Thank you, Corey. Really appreciate that introduction. And now that we've met U.S. Sailing President Corey Sertle, we're going to go around the Zoom meeting here and do some other introductions before we continue on. So I will call on people here to introduce themselves. And why don't we start with Rich Jepson.
Hi, I'm the Vice President of U.S. Sailing. I've been a volunteer since 1995, several stints on the board, and I come from the sail training and education part of the sport.
Super. Thank you, Rich. Thank you for all your service. Next up, I'll pick on Martine Zarankas.
Yeah, Martine out of Atlanta, Georgia, active laser sailor, been involved with U.S. Sailing as a competitor in the Lader Cup back in my younger years, and I'm pleased to be serving on the board as secretary and also very involved in my regional sailing association. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Martine, and we'll move on to John Schoendorf.
Hi, everyone. I am treasurer and member of the Coconut Grove Sailing Club, where I first learned to sail back somewhat like 100 years ago. I had the pleasure of hosting our current president, Corey, when she was becoming an Olympian. And she would live in our house in the winter times while her and her skipper were practicing. And she said, okay, it's your turn, John. You've taken a lot out of this sailing thing, and now it's time to get back. So that's how she got me involved.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. And also from the U.S. Sailing Board, we have Claire Cooper.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Cooper. I'm a board member of U.S. Sailing and also the chair of the Sailor Athlete Council. I'm a member of Southern Yacht Club here in New Orleans and the proud owner of a Lightning.
Excellent. Thanks, Claire. Congratulations on the Lightning. And next up, moving on to our staff here, we have Jack Gerhardt.
John, thanks. Good evening, everybody. I think I know probably a good number of you. Really appreciate you being on the call tonight. I've been in this role for coming up on 10 years, moving into my 11th. And prior to that, I was on board for about 4. So a good stint here at U.S. Sailing. I've enjoyed every day of it. My background is a sort of a weekend warrior sailor on J80s right now, and I just finished up as Commodore of the Beverly Yacht Club in Marion, Massachusetts about a year ago. So I've seen all parts of the sport, and I get excited every day to get up and come to work and work with all of you.
Thanks, Jack. All right, next up, we'll have Meredith Brody.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Meredith Brody. I'm based out of Hollywood, Florida, and I'm staff with U.S. Sailing as the Olympic director. I've worked with the team for over 8 years now, and I started just before the Olympic and Paralympic Games in London 2012, and then did the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Rio, and we are in our home stretch for Tokyo 2020.
Thanks, Meredith. All right, moving over to Lauren Cotta.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Cotta. I've been at U.S. Sailing for about 10 years. I'm the Director of Operations, and my focus is on membership. So I'd like to thank you all for being members of U.S. Sailing. I am an active One Design sailor, and I learned how to sail at Community Boating Center in Providence.
Awesome. And then moving on to a few of our newer additions, Heather Monison.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Heather Monison. I live in Somerset, Massachusetts, but I office out of Bristol, Rhode Island. I'm the Chief Financial Officer, and I have been here a whopping 5 months. I absolutely love being part of this team. The energy that the volunteers bring is just something that I haven't ever experienced in my 20-year career. Previously, I was with General Electric and Rexel in more of a corporate finance role. This space is so much more exciting. Thank you all for your time this evening. I can't wait to hear the discussion, so really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Heather, and welcome. It's been a great 5 months working with you. And last but not least is Jill Nosik. Hello, Jill.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you to every volunteer and leader who's on this call. We couldn't do this without you. You make a tremendous difference every day. And I want to thank you for that. So as your new Chief Development Officer, I'm thrilled to be on board. My role will be to walk shoulder to shoulder with you and help raise all the funds necessary so that we can make transformational change for our athletes, for our youth, for our fellow sailors. And I am a fellow sailor. I am the incoming Rear Commodore of the Jamestown Yacht Club, and I live here in Rhode Island. I've been a professional fundraiser for more than 30 years, and I have been with U.S. Sailing for 9 days. So I'm looking forward to many, many more days working with U.S. Sailing and working directly with you. So thank you.
Welcome, Jill. It's great to have you. So now I'm going to kick it over to Jack to introduce Heather and Jill.
That was the first item on my agenda, but you've already done that. I just wanted to recognize two of our latest additions to our senior management team that are really going to help us, I think, execute what we're going to be talking about this evening, and I believe add a incredible amount of value to the organization and the sport. So we're really excited to have them along with the rest of the staff team and volunteers that are here. So again, thank you all for being here and for all you do to support us and work with us as we work to support the sport. I'm going to take the next couple of minutes and talk a little bit about our strategic refresh, talk about sort of the background, how we got here, what the goals were of this refresh, and sort of introduce the elements of it. And then Lauren, Meredith, and John will go into a little bit more detail to give you sort of the areas that we're focusing on, some of the key initiatives. So why did we go through this? I think all of you are probably aware that back in 2017 and 2018, we introduced a strategic plan. I think this is part of the natural life cycle of strategic planning. You put something forward, it's a living, breathing roadmap, and it came time to refresh that, to review it. That was also driven by a lot of changes around us, some quite recent, others that had been brewing for several years. Changing environment around in the Olympic movement, around youth sports. You know, we're all very familiar with the tragedies around the Nassar incidents and issues with safe sport. That has prompted a bunch of activity within the federal government at the national level that's driving requirements and actually legislative changes that are impacting the organization. That's driving bylaw changes and things like that. As Corey said, you know, really taking a look in the mirror at our role as an NGB in the context of all these changes, safe sport, sailor athlete engagement, the compliance with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. It's no longer sort of a stamp that we get every year, but we're going to have to go through a pretty extensive certification process while maintaining sort of the level playing field that we do, ensuring integrity and providing the competitive infrastructure as well as the on-ramp to the sport. So it was an opportunity for us to really take a look at this. We began back in really January of this year, and we're lucky enough to work with a woman by the name of Avery Wilson, who's the Director of Strategic Planning at the USOPC. Very experienced, worked with probably over 30 governing bodies over the last several years as they had looked at their strategic plan, operational plan. So we had a really good sort of guider as we went through this process. We had a really knowledgeable and passionate working group that we put together of about 15 people, board members, staff members, and some volunteers. It was about a 4-month process, and the results of which we developed sort of completed in midsummer that were approved by the board. You know, the goal again was we needed to validate sort of the mission, principles, and our priorities. We wanted to make sure we were aligned on an overall vision for our organizational success. And then, what were the strategies that were going to help us achieve that? And then, from those priorities and pillars, really refine the roadmap going forward. We had a framework from 2018, and with all the changes happening around us and the work that we have done since 2018, we had this, I think, need to continue to focus our efforts, refine our activities, and develop continue to refine the roadmap that we're working on. So where we ended up, as we shared with the group and is here on the screen, sort of 3 key strategic priorities. This is sort of the pillars that are leading us forward, but underlying all this are the core business that we still do in supporting the sport. So the first one of Olympic and high performance. As an NGB, this is one of our core responsibilities, and there's a lot of connection with a lot of other areas of the sport, as Corey shared. The next area was member experience and value. Our members are core to what we do. We're here to serve them in the sport, and really understanding in sort of the 21st century how we can continue to shift and adjust and mold the organization to better support them, to make sure that we understand what their needs are and how we can best support them within the environment that's around us, how we can partner with organizations and deliver value to our members. And then thirdly, it's how do we do that effectively and efficiently? There are so many areas of this organization that has evolved over the last 10 years with the help of volunteers and staff, how we run more efficiently, how we implement new procedures and processes. We've got an incredible staff that's on board helping with execution, and how do we empower and improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the volunteers, because that's changed a lot over the years. We don't have volunteers that are able to dedicate full-time in their roles at U.S. Sailing. Some do, but the role of the volunteer has changed, and I think we need to make sure that we're supporting them and making them as effective as possible with the other priorities that they may have and other activities that they have along with supporting us. So those 3 areas are really the pillars or the legs of our stool as we go forward. They all involve engagement and interaction and collaboration with you. And we're really excited to share with you sort of where we're headed. This is the framework that we're moving forward with. We're about to share with the board the first steps we have for implementing this next year. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Meredith, who can give you an overview of what we're talking about when we look at Olympic and high performance, our focus there. So thank you.
Thanks, Jack. So there are multiple components of the Olympic and high performance strategic priority: coaching, education, and innovation, pipeline development, athlete retention, and athlete engagement. And with these components, our focus is to achieve Olympic and international sailing success with a supportive system, keeping sailors engaged full-time and long-term. We plan to do this through a high-performance coaching system, dependable infrastructure, education, and an athlete-centric approach. So for coaching, education, and innovation, we want to expand our coach education and certification pipeline to recruit, train, and retain more high-performance coaches. Stu Gilfillan is leading this, and he has outlined his plan to talk to the market and develop a framework and encourage more people who are not currently part of our system to get involved. We want to hold a high standard and leverage successful models to create a sustainable system. And we want to increase women's coaching and integrate more innovative coaching tools so we continue to upskill all of our coaches. For pipeline development, we want to scale up ODP and create more pathways to allow more athletes to be involved. We want to cultivate a strong pipeline of athletic talent. And we plan to leverage the fact that we're going to host the 2028 Games to identify, educate, and develop athletes with high performance potential. For athlete retention, the most important element here is creating a financial structure that will enable our top athletes to train and compete full-time for 8 years or more, because that's what it takes in our sport. Us truly creating a domestic platform is a key component to this. And so we'll talk about that in a little more detail. And then athlete engagement showcases the need for our athletes to be more involved with our membership. We need to tell their stories as athletes. We need to tell them often. We need to tell them well. And we need to have them interact with our communities and volunteers that support them. This will help us promote the sport of sailing, our US Sailing brand, and the athlete themselves while giving back and encouraging the youth sailors. With these 4 pieces, you may have noticed that we're not specifically targeting anything regarding our upcoming games, because that's considered base business. And these 4 items are areas that we need additional focus and targeted strategies to make progress on in 2021 and through the quad. So with that, I'll pass it to Lauren to review the next, which is member experience and value.
Thanks, Meredith. As Jack said, membership is core to what we do. We thank you all for being members. Thank you for recruiting your friends to be members, and thank you for your passion for the sport. Hopefully that's something that's translating through how we're talking you through tonight in this presentation, that we're all really excited about the work that US Sailing can do with your support and the guidance from our leadership. So a few ways that we plan on doing that from a membership experience is with our members and volunteers. We want to make sure that we're strengthening the sport through participation and engagement. There's an opportunity to continue to support the competitive aspect of our sport. We want to survey our sailors and understand the marketplace so that we can tailor membership products to serve you in the best way possible. An example of that might be through One Design Central. Betsy Allison has done a great job over the last 6 months in delivering from a click on the website to what a One Design sailor needs to be successful. We want to offer compelling pathways to engage your learning and keep you excited about the sport, as Meredith just mentioned, with coaching education and what Sue's leading. We want to help to create these products and services that meet your needs. So over the next year in 2021, you'll be seeing outreach from us to learn who the contacts are at your organizations, to make sure everyone from their perspective is receiving the best information possible, so that we can either create resources that don't exist today to help you be successful, or to help you recruit more sailors to strengthen diversity and inclusion in the sport. You may have also visited our website, and that's one area when you land there, we want to create a better visitor experience to be targeting your next steps to keep participating in our courses and make the most out of your membership. So really looking forward to kicking off 2021 and providing you the best experience possible. So thank you. And JP, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, and then sort of the third pillar here is really a supporting pillar to make sure that our focus on being the best NGB that we can be, and our focus on being the best member organization that we can be, is supported properly by our organization itself. And so this is a little bit more inward looking to make sure that we are developing resources, that we're using them very efficiently, and that we're continuing to sort of tune the organization to be running, as efficiently as possible and have the best possible output. So, resource growth is pretty self-explanatory, but it's really taking advantage of the opportunity to, sell great products and services to our membership and to our community, to cultivate a donor base that is really supportive of all of our efforts across the board, and to, create strategic partnerships and sponsorships with organizations that have the same goals that we do. When it comes to committee efficiency, this sort of dovetails with what Lauren was highlighting a moment ago with the volunteer experience, and really taking the next steps on making sure that we're using our incredible volunteer network and specifically our committee structure to follow through on these goals and have an impact. And, of course, thank you all for being, that impact and leading the charge with your committees and in your roles. And so this is taking that to the next level and really making sure it's a priority to continue to optimize that. Staff development, of course, as a staff member, this resonates with me. We have a wonderful team. I really enjoy working with them and taking the next steps with our culture and our internal, staff group to make sure that we're, cultivating the best possible people and using our resources the best we can. So very excited about that. And then, data-driven processes. Again, this is somewhat self-explanatory, but it's really a great opportunity to use what we know about the sport and about our participants and learn more and utilize that learning to make the sport better and to, deliver a better experience. Frankly, there's a lot of learning to be done in terms of what is the actual data in the sport, and we're going to undertake the effort to, find that and to put it to good use. So I think that sums up the organizational effectiveness, and then I'll kick it to you, Jack, to sort of sum things up.
Great, thanks, John. Good walkthrough of sort of the key pillars there. Just that one last little bullet point on there is the our project to start to develop a sport-wide survey on participation. I think U.S. Sailing's in the best position to do that with, our volunteer network and all the organizational members we have. So that's a really exciting thing that I'm looking forward to, and I think it's going to be a great tool for us to tell how we're doing against the objectives that we set, as well as inform everybody out on the water and supporting the sport, how things are going, what's working and what's not. So looking forward to working with everybody on that. I think just to sort of wrap this up, as we started, these are key priorities that are a focal point for us, but underlying all of that is, we're going to strive to steer the organization in sport towards growth by continuing to focus on our strengths in core sailor services in the areas of youth and of safety and competition, access and education. So those pillars, those elements of sort of our day-to-day business, we're going to continue to do and focus on and work on improving. And these priorities are elements of how we're directing those to advance us in our mission. I think we've already started work on this, and I want to hand it over to Rich, who's going to talk a little bit about that and really how you all have impacted us as we started down this pathway. Over to you, Rich.
Thank you, Jack. I was struck recently as I saw some of our communications coming out with the phrase "together we," and "together we" is sort of a STEM phrase that we're connecting to a lot of different parts of our efforts. And for me, it connotes one sport, one organization, one mission, and a shared set of inclusive ideals to guide us and to make sailing bigger and stronger and more rewarding for all of us. To that end, please allow me to briefly recognize some volunteers who've been exemplifying Together We with some hard work and great results. Their efforts display our commitment to continual improvement, resulting in very significant improvements to our service to volunteers, our membership, and all American sailors. First up is the Race Admin Task Force. Charlie Arms with Randy Drafts and several other key leaders have spent the last 6 months on a top to bottom review of our service to racing sailors and officials. They've created 60 recommendations to the board and staff leadership aimed to better support our race admin volunteers, instructors, officials, and racing sailors. In offshore, Matt Gallagher has been working with Nathan and past chair Ron White to ensure we trim sails, for the constantly evolving world of big boat handicap racing. And they're also exploring ways that U.S. Sailing can be more helpful both to the PHRF community and the Portsmouth Yardstick community. U.S. Sailing Foundation has been reimagined under the leadership of Bill Rue, who's been a driving force behind professionalizing our development and fundraising while simultaneously reimagining the entire structure and mission of the foundation. I wish also to recognize Brian Keene and Bruce Burton, who have been working tirelessly on behalf of our Olympic fundraising effort, not only this year, but in many previous years. And then to the Olympic effort, Paul Kayard has thrown himself at the multifaceted challenge of sustained Olympic excellence with promising early results, including the enlisting of a leading consulting firm, McKinsey, to build a plan of excellence and sustained performance in all aspects, top to bottom, of our Olympic effort. The board of directors and key Olympic leaders have been deeply engaged on this as well. We'll share McKinsey's advice once it is complete, which I expect will be very soon. Online education products. One of the stars of the spring has been the education department's success with online training. And part of their success can be laid at the feet of Larry Ledgerwood, our training committee chair, and the committee members and the national faculty for a bunch of hard work last year, transitioning our model to a professionalized product development model, rewriting the rules on the volunteer roles and making it fully synergized with the board initiative called Staff-Led Volunteer Supported. This hard work resulted in the liberation of the education department team to create products, most of them online, at an astounding rate this year. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Lou Sandoval and Deborah Abrams-Wright, our chair, have been simultaneously championing outward-facing initiatives while hard at work with the rest of the committee on building a sustainable framework for the future. We're in the middle of a DEI strategic plan to support our new overall strategic plan, which you just heard about. And it will guide U.S. Sailing to use inclusive and equitable processes to grow the sport and the organization. One Design Council is reinvigorated with new leadership. Chris Snow and Debbie Probst have been named to lead this council. And while they're brand new to their roles, they're well known for being doers. We're excited to have them. The recent One Design survey, driven by Betsy and Nancy Mazzulli, inspired 180 sailors to help. An advisory council out of that group was established, and 46 of those volunteers were integral to defining objectives of and content for the new One Design Central portal. This team is adding more initiatives and assigning them to task forces as I speak. COVID task force. Special thanks to Stephanie Webb, Edison Sailing Center in Florida, Kathy Allen, Mentor Harbor Yachting Club in Ohio, Jessica Haverstock, Lake Minnetonka Sailing School in Minnesota. They led 21 volunteers from around the country to review COVID-19 guidelines from government agencies and develop practical recommendations for youth sailing programs and member organizations. This group also contributed to U.S. Sailing's Guidance for Junior Sailing Programs document and led several panel discussions on adapting sailing program guidelines through the Starboard portal. Another initiative, Return to Competition Task Force, getting junior programs and racing going again responsibly. This huge task force had dozens of volunteers, but Tom Barnes, PHRF committee, Taryn Teague, chair of Race Management Committee, and Mark Townsend of ABYC were particularly instrumental in helping assemble the resources and communicate with the sailing community via the online leadership forums. Their efforts have borne fruit with several education and competition events held safely and without incident. Sailor Athlete Council, Claire Cooper and Bree Provancha, have invigorated the sailor athlete community as they're engaged with its increased role in leadership and ensuring all sailor athletes understand that they're relevant to the process and are needed in our leadership. Lastly, but not leastly, Bylaws Task Force. Clark Chapin, a treasure of the organization, if you know him, Clark is working with speed and alacrity on the many changes brought on by our focus on the multiple critical initiatives, such as sustainable international racing success, customer-centric service to our sailors and members, which is called Customer Connect, as well as our staff-led, volunteer-supported initiative. Several volunteers have been helping him with that heavy lifting, most notably U.S. Sailing Secretary Martine Zarinskas. So on behalf of the board and staff, I thank each of these fine leaders for the historic work that they're doing right now on behalf of the sport as volunteers. And I do want to thank every one of you on this call, myself, for the years, even decades of selfless effort that you've given the sport and the organization we love. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everybody who was just highlighted there. So now I believe we're going to move into our question and answer period. So please put your questions in the chat. I see there's already some activity there, and you may get an answer directly in the chat, but we will get to the chat at the end. But first, we have the questions that were submitted via the survey that was included in the invitation email. So we're going to address those in the order that they were received, make sure everyone gets the questions answered. So first up, this question I believe is going to be answered by Corey. Now that you've had the Race Administration Task Force Town Hall and have heard what steps the administration are planning to implement in response to the Race Administration survey, how does the Board of Directors propose to address the issues of concern of the race official volunteers?
Thank you for the question, John. The board initiated this task force. And again, I'd really like to echo the thanks for Charlie as well. You know, awesome job. Awesome session we had on Monday night with our race admin group. The board's taking every one of the recommendations seriously and looking at what we can do and prioritizing what we're going to do next. So we are then interfacing with all of the different committees and understanding what we are able to do, you know, next month, next year, and beyond. So that's how we're approaching it, and also taking a really hard look at our resources and where we're allocating our efforts moving forward.
Super. Thank you, Corey. Okay, next up, this question is going to be for Jack. What support will you give to community sailing programs, commercial schools, and other non-racing entities that grow the sport?
Thanks, John. And I noticed there was a question or two in the chat about a little relating to this, sort of the non-racing side of things. You know, we look at community sailing centers, at the commercial schools, and at yacht clubs with their education programs as a core part of our organization. They're the ones delivering, you know, the experience to the sailors, to all of our sort of end customers, if you will. And I think the core products that I mentioned a little earlier in services and programs are going to continue to support them. It's about our, you know, the great work that our education department does that Rich mentioned a little bit earlier, how we've pivoted and shifted some of those things. We've got our small boat program that is delivering some great curriculum and instructor training there. We've, you know, developed, you know, standards for education that are sort of the benchmark for a lot of on-water training. And those are very applicable to the community sailing programs, commercial schools. You know, things like the Siebel program, which is, you know, a program we launched this past year, really got going this year. It's delivering, you know, great coaching, cool boats to kids that might not have an opportunity to do that. And we're doing that across the country. You know, the accreditation program we have to help community sailing centers deliver, you know, what are best practices in running education programs. The regional symposiums, national sailings, the NSPS program. These are all, I think, activities and areas where we're working hard and will continue to do to support, the grassroots entry points, on ramps for the sport. This past sort of 7 months as we've all been dealing with the challenges. And I think, all of you have had just incredible roles in helping get people back out on the water. But the work that we did collectively to provide the return to play guidance that we did, I think that helped give people a lot of thought and ideas on how to open things back up again. So there's a lot of things that we do and we're going to continue to do that support that core function of getting people out on the water.
Thank you, Jack. And I have another question for you to follow up. So this is sort of related, perhaps. What role will U.S. powerboating play? From our vantage point, there is a large demand for powerboat training, which could be a nice revenue source.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we talk about quite often. As everybody on this call, I'm sure knows, if you look at the marketplace for recreational boating, powerboat is sort of 90+%. And there's an incredible opportunity for education there. And I think the industry understands that as more people use their boats and they use them more, that's better for them. And, we've created a program under the training and education group. Rich has been very involved with this, along with Timmy Lahr and many, many other volunteers that created this really sort of standard setting hands-on powerboat training program that was used by the Coast Guard as a benchmark, again, for developing on the water training. And we developed it to support our instructors. So when they're out on the water, they know how to use their most critical tool properly. It has evolved to support race officiating and race officials. And it's become I think a pretty attractive offering for many of these organizations that we support, that can sort of provide it into sort of the marketplace that we participate in. Outside of that, in the powerboat space, we don't really have a footprint. And one of the elements of our strategic plan and priority going forward is exactly what you're asking here. How do we leverage that into the broader marketplace, to that 90% of boaters that we don't really touch? With a brand of U.S. Sailing, it's a little challenging to get power boaters sometimes to listen to us. And we feel that working with organizations possibly like Boat US, some of the manufacturers, and really developing some strong partnerships with people that can take it out into the market, we're going to make some progress there. So that is actually a priority for us in 2021, is to develop sort of the plan and business plan to do that. So we can continue to deliver it into our core audience, but at the same time work with others to spread that really valuable curriculum to others.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, our next question is going to be answered by Rich. The strategic plan is visually exciting, but again misses showing diversity. How do you intend to welcome others and grow the sport?
Thank you. Thanks, John. So first I'll point out, while the mention of diversity seems a bit sparse in the presentation, actually in our actual strategic plan refresh that I think you all have seen, diversity is laid out quite prominently as one of the key strategic initiatives and objectives under one of those three pillars. So that being said, the point is really, well, what are we going to do about that? And so I'll say that the building of the diversity, equity and inclusion task force, the building out and improving of our DEI committee are just a couple of beginning examples of our new commitment to equity and inclusion. And we have a very active DEI committee who have taken it upon themselves to be responsible to advise the board and the staff on more DEI centric behaviors and protocols and rubrics, and also reaching outside themselves and partnering with a whole variety of private and public access programs to introduce more sailors. I think the one thing that we've recognized is We need to work from the bottom and the top. The top meaning we're doing very well with gender parity. As you can see from the faces on this call, all the female leaders, but women are underrepresented in the grassroots ranks, as are people of color and other underserved communities. And it's our promise that we are going to tackle each one of these problems the way it needs to be. And I think our first step is for the grassroots members, make sure they're seeing people in positions of responsibility that look like them, and making sure that we don't just remain available, but we recruit and invite and lure, if you will, folks into the space and make sure it feels safe and comfortable for them, because people will not stay in sailing if they don't feel safe and comfortable.
Excellent. Thank you, Rich. And I'm going to follow up with another question for you, Rich, if you don't mind. This one is a bit longer, so bear with me. U.S. Sailing has a deserved reputation as race-oriented entity to the detriment of its brand. Are there any alignments or promotions with nonprofits or other organizations which might engage both the racing and non-racing sailor? An example of this is Hands Across the Sea, who is partnered with ASA.
Right. So first, I'd have to challenge the notion that our responsibilities for racing sailors are detrimental to our brand. But point taken. I entered the sport, or entered U.S. Sailing, as a club racer whose main responsibility was non-racing, teaching people how to sail. So I totally understand the tug and the push and the pull between competitive support of competitive sailing and support of learn to sail. I think we do a ton of things that are actually much more expensive and much impactful than ASA's marketing sponsorship of Hands Across the Sea. But I'm not here to compare the two organizations. I think what ASA is doing is laudable. But if you just take a look at our REACH program, at our sailors, our Seable Sailors program, we have a whole variety of things that we are doing that are aimed at the grassroots sailor, aimed at growing the sport, aimed at bringing us new sailors and members. One could argue, on a percentage basis, whether non-racing sailing gets its due, but I feel very good about where we're going. I would say 10 years ago, that was a much more valid concern than it's becoming now.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, our next question is for Mr. Schoendorf. The question is U.S. Sailing concerned that with the bifurcation of our sport into two big segments, professional and Corinthian, parentheses, have fun, the emphasis on Olympic and international excellence will fail to increase U.S. Sailing membership over time? Oh, I think you may be on mute still, John. John, I think you're on mute. Can I unmute him? I don't think I have unmute privileges on here. Oh no. Well, maybe, oh, there we go.
I was so wound up, I was getting fired up here. Okay. I think quite the contrary. I think that to a lot of people's surprise, performance sailing has helped develop sailing. And I think the things that may be hurting membership are unrelated to the professionalism of the sport and focus on performance sailing. Everybody should know that right now, one of our board members is trying to engage the professional side of our sport into being active with U.S. Sailing, and we're trying to come up with some benefits, and there is a strong interest in that. but I think the best way to answer this is my personal experience. I was race committee. I spent 3 years over 12 months being race chair, and I was on my board for about 20 years and treasurer. So I was very involved. I spent more time at the sailing club than at home. I watched the sailing program. I raced both Lightning, Snipes, and big boats. And the thing that was interesting in getting, as I got older, a lot of the young people that were only into racing, they ate, slept, and drank racing prams, small boats, grew up. And as they were growing up, the way the big boat guys got talent on the boat is they tapped into those One Design classes, and they would get them to go racing with them. And the way they would hook them is say, I'll feed you and I'll pay for your travel, and we'll spend an extra week on the way back from in Miami. We go to the Bahamas, and we used to have 3 or 4 races a year in the summer. And the kids got to see both sides. They got the excitement of racing. And then now I'm seeing they have families and they're putting their kids through. And then the best part that I get to see is the young people get their parents to get a boat, because the parents see how exciting it is for the kids. So I don't think that's an issue anymore. I think things like money and the new world that we are all in are affecting us. And we're trying to find ways to address that and get young people engaged, especially when they get out of college and they're trying to start families. I hope that helps a little bit with the thought process.
Super. Thank you, John. Okay, the next question is for Martine. What are the programs that will ensure U.S. Sailing instills its core values across the organization and its membership?
So thanks to whoever submitted this question. I think we've heard a lot about in our strategic plan, our education and our training programs, and they still remain a key component of our business and the service that we provide to the sport and our membership as well. And through those programs, we're talking about certifying your basic level 1 instructor to teach beginner Green Fleet prams or opties, all the way up to safety at sea for big boat sailors, to keel boat certifications, powerboat, and then even our high performance coaching, developing that pathway for education to be able to promote sailing at a lower level and increase to a higher level. So I think that's going to stay and become even more significant in the future. And through those education programs, we also indirectly create that sailor pipeline. So good coaching creates the base, creates the pipeline to feed to higher performance sailing across the board. And keep in mind, the high performance sailing doesn't necessarily always mean a 49er. It can be just high performance laser sailing or high performance J24 sailing. There's a lot to be learned no matter what type of boat you are. And I think working with our One Design Council, we're going to be able to spread those tools. And then I think you're going to see that core business of supporting the playing field through our competitive services and our race management teams. You know, they are critical for our sport in the racing end to continue to thrive. And for us to have more sailors participating, we need more race management, and we need to support them and their needs. And so we're doing a lot of listening, and we've got the recommendations and going to take that the next step. And then I think the competitive services, that's really, we talk about the ratings and the offshore, and sometimes I'll be the first to say it's very confusing, but it's an important part of our business. And those sailors, we want them to value their U.S. Sailing membership and get their ratings, and we support them through that department. So I think you're going to see a lot of the different things woven into all the different programs that we offer. But our core mission, if you go back to the strategic plan that John and Jack shared earlier, our core values, and we state this on the very front page: respect, integrity, excellence, collective success, clarity, transparency, and sustainability. Those are some key words that we're all living up to in the staff, the board, and we want our membership too.
Super. Thank you, Martine. Appreciate that. Okay, so now shifting gears a little bit, and I will I'll introduce these questions with saying that the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics is one of the most exciting things and opportunities that's going to happen in our lifetimes. So a lot of what we're setting ourselves up for here, I think, is to take full advantage of that for our sport and for the country. So for Meredith, I have a few questions. What plans do you have to turn the U.S. Sailing Centers in Miami and Long Beach into proper training facilities for your athletes?
Awesome. Thanks, John. Our strategic plan does outline our focus on more of a domestic platform, specifically in Miami and Long Beach. These are key locations and components. Miami's been a long-term home at the U.S. Sailing Center in Miami, and Long Beach clearly will be the host of the games in 2028. In Miami, we have made some progress at the U.S. Sailing Center within the past year and a half. We have a proper team-only locker room where all the athletes have storage space, and grateful for John Schoendorf on the call, who has generously set up a workbench and a drill press, and we have other locals who have supported with the outfitting of that locker room. There's quotes from previous Olympians on it. It's an inspiring place, and just for the team. We also have a dedicated debrief room that is in honor of the late Olympian Trevor Oakley Moore, and a medal wall showcasing all of our 60 U.S. Olympic and Paralympic medals. And then in Long Beach, we came off of a very productive training this summer where we had the NACRAs based out of ABYC and the 49ers at the U.S. Sailing Center in Long Beach. And part of our 2021 plan detail outlined the need for the detail of the long-term plan for Long Beach. Just yesterday, I met with John Shadden, who is a Long Beach local and a medalist from the Seoul Games, as well as with Paul Kayard, and we're talking through what we need to do to buff out the 2021 plans and the timing and the details and the legality and the city property. So we're grateful for the time that we have between now and 2028, but planning has started and we've got a decent way to go, but the conversations are active. It's super important to mention that the community in both the areas has been incredibly supportive, and it's been noticed and well received by the athletes. As we continue to spend more time in both those areas with our domestic calendar, we historically have only had one event, Olympic class event in the States for our recent history. In Miami, the OCR World Cup Series, it's had lots of names, but we're moving into a 6 regatta circuit with 3 events in Florida and 3 events in California. Both Miami and Long Beach will host one of those events. And so this 6-part series will have more athletes training consistently in the US. And as we continue to grow as a team, these facilities and our need to expand will continue to grow as well. We're really lucky because both of those areas have awesome conditions, especially during the time of year that we're there. And the community of yacht clubs, community sailing centers, and the volunteers that help get our athletes on the water are key and really help make it happen. So we're excited about our future in both areas.
Super. Thank you, Meredith. And I have another question for you. What is the feedback, positive or negative, that you are receiving from corporations as you pitch them for U.S. Sailing Team sponsorship?
So from a positive side, we get a lot of positive responses from corporate sponsors. There's certainly a lot of potential and opportunity to work with the team. Most potential partners are excited about brand alignment and connection with the team because it's the highest level of the sport, top tier athletes, and they align with a lot of core values that we have. We are currently in the process of building more assets that will create the foundation for more long-term corporate relationships, but that's also part of our current challenge. So from a negative side, partners are constantly asking us for more sellable assets. And We currently struggle with some athlete recognition, especially with our low number of events that we have in the US to create broadcast opportunities. So part of our strategic plan is to have that athlete engagement because we need to tell our stories better. But we're working on these things, specifically the domestic platform and the racing that we're planning. We'll continue to build out our visual assets library, and that's definitely been a focus. And we have some really talented interns that have been helping with us, even during COVID, during training, to get more and more and start building our brand a bit better than we've had it in the recent past. So hopefully you've seen some progress recently, and it's only going to get better. And so we really need to focus on keeping our team visually present. We are really lucky to have industry leaders like Harkin and McLube, who have been long-term partners of the team, and we truly value those relationships.
Super. Thank you, Meredith. The next question is for Claire. How do you plan to gain the top athletes' trust as you move forward?
Thanks, John. That is something we've given a lot of thought and are already making strides towards. Much of the path going forward involves more athlete engagement at all levels of US Sailing and really weaving in athletes to the fabric of the organization. Just a few months ago, the athletes elected their new representatives to the USOPC Athlete Advisory Council, and that's going to be Maggie Shea and Judge Ryan, and they are going to be joining the board of directors going forward. And so already athletes have elected people they trust to represent them, and we're incorporating them into the fold of the organization, as well as doing really making a conscious effort to increase transparency with athletes. So the Sailor Athlete Council is going to be working to organize quarterly town halls for athletes to foster that trust relationship and give athletes an opportunity to express concerns and ask questions of the organization, as well as for the organization and the staff and volunteers to give them information as well.
Super. Thank you, Claire, and great to have Maggie and Judge on board. Okay, I think I have one more question from the submissions, and then we'll go to the chat. So if you have your chat questions, now's a great time to put them in there. So Meredith, I think this goes back to you, talking about the Olympic program. Why has a year gone by and there's still no executive in place to lead the US Sailing team?
So in 2020, we actually did not plan to hire a new executive to lead the team. Instead, we utilized the long-term support that we had within the team. So we internally call ourselves the Core Four, but Luther Carpenter is our head coach. He's been part of Olympic sailing for, I think, almost 30 years. Sally Barco is our performance manager. She's also the NACRA coach, but that's her focus, as well as supporting IR&D and everything that our Rockstar analyst Riley Shutt does. And then Leandro Spina is our Olympic development director. And then with myself, that wraps up the four of us. So we're a team that works together, communicates very openly, and really is vocal and calls ourselves out. And we've been incredibly transparent with the athletes throughout this process. COVID gave us an opportunity to have lots of one-on-one time with the athletes and lots of webinars. But we really think it created an opportunity to kind of shift our culture to be more transparent. And then with that, paired with the USOPC becoming more transparent financially, we also have become more financially transparent with our athletes. And so we've created more opportunity than we had in the past to be more open. So despite the fact we didn't bring someone to the very top of the program, or a new person rather, I'm really happy with how this year has gone. And we've received a lot of good feedback from the athletes. And then Jack has consistently been our leader as our CEO, keeping us on target too from the whole organization standpoint. So we're definitely a team and we're working together like one.
John, if I could just chime in too, and thank you, Meredith, for your answer. And COVID has given us, as you look at everything that happens that's not good, you can also look at, it's presented us an opportunity, and it's presented us an opportunity for our athletes to, refresh and to gain strength and to look ahead towards Tokyo 21 now. But it's also given all of us on the board, together with the core four that Meredith just talked about, to take a look at how we can create an 8-year plan that will get us to LA 2028. And we've heard talk about that on this call tonight. And we're really excited that one of our volunteers on the Olympic Sailing Committee, Paul Kayard, is leading the charge with a project that with 11 consultants from McKinsey who are sailors, who are looking ahead and helping us together with our board and our staff to craft an 8-year plan. And we're really looking forward to sharing that with the board shortly, and then figuring out our next steps with that. So when people ask about next steps in leadership, we are definitely addressing that and looking really hopeful for what we're going to do in the future with our Olympic program. But we're taking our time, we're being very thoughtful, and we're building on our successes and the key people we have in roles right now. So thanks, John, for letting me pile on that one.
Of course. Excellent. Okay, well, I think that concludes our submitted questions. So now we'll go to the chat. This question will be for you, Jack. Very few of my local sailors belong to U.S. Sailing. If asked, how do I respond to this question? What % of my dues go to race management? That is the only part of U.S. Sailing that affects me. Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, there we go.
Thanks, John. I saw that on the chat, and Craig, thank you for bringing that up. I know it's a question that we had a lot of earlier this week. Just sort of looking at the rough numbers, we generate approximately a little over $2 million a year in membership dues from 40,000 members. We're a little under that at the moment now. And if you look collectively at our expenses in the race administration department, it's going to be approximately 10 to 12% if you include the subscription and the investment we make in our support for World Sailing, which has a lot to do with the rules. If you want to add in the support that they get from other parts of the organization on the communications website of things, the 10 to 12% is probably a good baseline for that. I think one of the reasons that's a little bit less than you might expect is we have an extremely active and productive volunteer core in that area. And traditionally, race administration has really been driven by the volunteers. They're drafting, they're building the education materials, they deliver the curriculums, and they're very involved in some of the processes for advancing race officials. So we're really lucky in that we have the volunteers that we do in that from that standpoint. Now, with that said, what's come out of this working group that Charlie led and a lot of folks contributed to is that we need to put more resources behind that to advance that program. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing this next year. I would also say, Craig, that I think when you look at it just front and center, yes, race administration and the rules is exactly what's impacting you and your sailors. But think about, you know, the structure of the governance of the sport, of, you know, your ability for appeals, the grievance process that we maintain, the whole safe sport side of things that we are sort of required as a sport to support. I mean, just the introduction of that over the last 3 years has added, you know, over $150,000, if not more, to our budget to support that. So there's a lot of tentacles, I think, that go out to support, you know, folks like you and your sailors. So, you know, and membership dues go to support those. So we thank you for that. And I hope you will take that back to your sailors and encourage them to join us. And I'm happy to talk with any of them at any time.
Super. Thanks, Jack. And I see Lauren and I nodding because we were very excited to engage the grassroots racers coming up this year, and really grassroots sailors of all types. The next question from the chat, I think, will be for Meredith and or maybe John. The question is quite simple. Is funding for our Olympians adequate?
It's a huge challenge right now, which is why it's part of our strategic plan as part of the athlete retention component, because we desperately need to create financial sustainability in our program. Our run rate and our line of sight on funds is not where it needs to be for us to be a professional sports team, for us to keep our plan on track. Not just thinking about Tokyo, but, you know, we are thinking about Paris 2024 and LA 2028. And the games are changing. As we launch into 2021, we expect the IOC to confirm 5 new classes, and that's gonna change. And so our costs change. And one of the biggest things is, because our program can't support all the key elements that athletes need, that the athletes also have to do a large number of fundraising on their own. And with them doing that fundraising, they're not thinking about what they need to do on the boat. They're not thinking about their on the water performance, because they are asking for money. So what we need to do as a program is be able to have more funds so we can contribute more effectively to the athletes. And so they have to do less fundraising and can focus on the water. We do have incredible support from the USOPC and donors, and also partners who support the team. But we truly do need to do a lot more. Frankly, no, it's not adequate right now, but thankfully, we've got a lot of smart people working on it, and we hope with the outcomes of the McKinsey study and the strategic refresh, we truly can keep athletes retained, but it takes money to do that.
I'm going to throw my 2 cents in too, Meredith. One of the things that people may not know is our membership dues do not contribute to the Olympic program. Our membership dues are focused on all our other activities. And we have our specific directed fundraising efforts raise money for the Olympics. We are now, with Bill Rue coming on board to head up the foundation, and with Jill coming on board, we are going to have, our focus is going to be to try to have an endowment that will take years to do, but we're going to focus on this, on establishing an endowment that will fund all the needs that Meredith was talking about. We've never tried this before, but clearly that's what needs to happen so that we can not have to worry about the money side of things. We've been very lucky in the past with being able to garner large numbers to support it, but as Meredith said, we have to get more money. So that's our latest challenge.
Thank you, Meredith and John. And we're just about a quarter after the hour here, so I think we are kind of at our limit here, but looking at the chat, I see maybe one more question that we could use as a summary, and then if there's any other questions that have not been answered, we'll follow up. And so I think I'll direct this one at Jack again. And perhaps Jack, you could wrap up a little bit there, and then we'll hear from Corey to wrap things up as well. Anyhow, so Jack, the question is, racing and the top of the pyramid have gotten a lot of attention here. Does this new plan include any efforts to support new and recreational sailors of all ages?
Thanks, John. Great question, and tried to touch on a little bit of that earlier, just with the work and the support we're doing in our core basic business, which is around education programs, support for community sailing, and really getting people on the water with the skills that they need to be confident and stay in the sport. You know, sailing is a really vast recreation activity, and there's so many different ways to consume it, to engage with it, that, you know, we as an organization that has a operating budget for the association of a little over $6.5 million, there's only so much we can do. And I think one of the efforts and reasons behind our strategic plan and sort of reset was to make sure that we're putting those dollars, our membership dollars, to the most effective use. And, you know, we can't do everything, but what we do really well is we deliver great education programming that the marketplace and our members can use. And we put in place mechanisms and networks to support them as they do that. And then for those that want to go off and have, you know, other experiences and get, you know, specialized education or specialized skills on the cruising side or in other areas, you know, there's wonderful organizations and people out there that can help them do that. But I think we need to stick to the core, the base, which is providing a high quality on-ramp into the sport for people that are interested in getting involved, and then providing them a sort of a pathway and some guidance as they want to advance their experience and their activities. So that's sort of my answer to that one.
Super. Thank you, Jack. And so thank you everybody who's participated in the chat here, and please send us further questions in the future. But to wrap things up here, I'll pass it over to Corey.
Thanks, John, and thanks to my fellow board members who are working really hard on everyone's behalf for the sport. Really appreciate everybody taking their time today, as well as John, Jack, Meredith, and Lauren. Really appreciate that, but especially want to thank all of you who come tonight, who are volunteers for U.S. Sailing, who serve on committees, some of you for really long periods of time, and are incredibly dedicated to helping, you know, all aspects of the sport. Really, really want to thank you for your engagement and all you do. It's really amazing how much volunteer effort there is and passion there is for our sport. And I'm been really thrilled to serve alongside everybody and to have been part of this adventure that I've been on leading U.S. Sailing the last couple of years. So thank you again. And just in closing, any of the questions that people have submitted either ahead of time or in the chat, we will have an opportunity to get back to you on those. And as far as any other questions, all of us as board members are open to any of your questions. Our email addresses are on U.S. Sailing's website, and we welcome any questions from you. And we look forward. We know how challenging 2020's been, and it's been really amazing to see how everyone's responded to go sailing, get their organization sailing, get kids out sailing. It's been, you know, to me, the times I've gone sailing have been really rewarding this summer, and really appreciate the opportunity. So I really applaud everybody who's been part of that this year, and look forward to seeing everybody on the water in 2021. So thanks again. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.